Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Eichhoff, and I serve as the Associate Director for Alumni Relations at John Carroll University. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our John Carroll University Valentine's Day Wine Tasting Social. We are thrilled to have you with us here tonight. First off, I want to say a special thank you to the Wine Spot and specifically Shelly Taxel, who has been instrumental in helping us with this program this evening. Shelly, would you like to say a quick hello to our guests?
Yes, I would. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Super excited to do this with everyone. Eric reached out to me, and knowing that it's a local university and he was really passionate about using a local wine shop and happily chose us. It's very exciting. I really wanted to keep that idea of local and work with a local importer who is Mr. Tony Marchetti. You'll see his screen, and he imports for the Monchiero family, who we will be tasting tonight. So the idea was to really keep this as a local group, local businesses for a local university, and so many local Clevelanders as well, even those that are out of town. So that's kind of how this idea was born. Really excited for you to try the wines and hope you enjoy everything. And thank you from us at the Wine Spot for being part of this. Please always remember, if you need anything, we're there. And lastly, I would encourage everyone, grab a glass of the Arnaise or a glass of whichever one of the reds, and let's cheers to each other and say welcome and happy early Valentine's Day and early weekend, and everyone enjoy. So cheers to all of you. Thank you. And I will give it back to Eric to introduce our speaker and the Monchiero family.
Great. Thank you, Shelly. This program is truly unique, as Shelly kind of alluded to. For those who purchase wine here in Cleveland through the Wine Spot, we really are fortunate to have the entire supply chain with us tonight, which means the family that grows the grapes and produces the wine, to the importer, to the local wine seller. Everyone is here on this call tonight for this special evening. So again, thank you all so much for being with us and for taking time out of your evenings to be here with us. Before I introduce our featured speaker, I would like to just do a quick housekeeping for the enjoyment of our program. First, make sure you stay muted through the entirety of the presentation. That will make sure it runs smoothly and we can enjoy and learn from Alan. If you have questions, please use the chat feature. If our intention is to wait till the end of the program to ask the questions. However, if it's something about the specific wine that we're tasting, go ahead and type it in, and I will ask our presenters a little bit about your question so that we can answer it at the most appropriate time. And then finally, following the presentation, we will have a few moments to enjoy each other's company. But however, you do not need to stay for the entire program or social gathering if you don't want to. We will plan on ending that portion by about 9 p.m. Give me 1 second. We have a couple of people I need to let in. All right. It is now my pleasure to introduce Alan Tardy, our featured presenter for the evening. Alan Tardy is a freelance wine journalist who can be read in Wine and Spirits Magazine, Wine Spectator, the New York Times Sommelier Journal, and Wine Folly. He's a wine educator and author of 2 award-winning books, Romancing the Vine from St. Martin's Press in 2006, and Champagne Uncorked from Hachette in 2016. He lived in the Barolo village of Castiglione Folletto for over a decade, working in the vineyards and wineries and managing the town's Cantina Comunale. He holds certificates of wine scholar, of Italian Wine Scholar, IWS, and Champagne Master Level from the Wine Scholar Guild. He is a certified specialist of wine, CSW, from the Society of Wine Educators, and a Level 3 Wine and Spirits Education Trust, WSET. Alan, thank you again so much for being with us tonight. We look forward to learning from you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the great introduction. I'm really thrilled to be here, mostly to share these wonderful wines with you and hopefully try to give you a little bit of insight into them so that you can enjoy them even more. But I'm especially pleased to have Luca Monchiero here with us. I think it's about 1:30 or so in the morning in Italy. So very happy to have him here. And talk a little bit about who Luca is. And well, of course, he's the son. He's the one of the two brothers, sons of the family, who is now becoming very active in the winery. And I knew Luca. I moved to Casonifoletto in 2003. So at that point, Luca was quite a young boy, and he's really, I've watched him grow up and really kind of take a position in the winery. So it's great to have him here with us tonight. Really appreciate his being here. So we're going to take a deep dive now in. I'll share my screen, and let's see where we are. So here is a picture of Piemonte Casonifoletto. We'll take a look at where that actually is. I just want to give us a little bit of introduction to the area first. This is the Monchiero family. You see Luca there, the second from the right. That's his mother Daniela, Vittorio, and Stefano, his younger brother. So it's very much a family winery. Now, what does that mean? But first, let's see where we are here. Piemonte, up in the northwest of Italy, the northwestern corner, borders France. On one side, it goes up into Switzerland, right at the border of Switzerland, the San Bernardo Pass. And here is a topographical map of the region. So you can really see that it's defined by the Alps to the north and to the west, and they circle around there. And you see there's the Ligurian Sea right down at the bottom, very close to Piemonte, but it doesn't have that much influence because of the Apennines. After the Alps leave off, they carry into the Ligurian Apennines and then all the way down the spine, the backbone of the Italian peninsula. What I've circled here is the town of Alba, which we'll get to know a little bit when we're talking about the wines of Monchiero and the Langhe area. But you can see where it's located. It's Piemonte means foot in the mountains, and you can see that that's really what it is. Pretty close proximity to the Maritime Alps in the south, and then the northwestern border of the Alps, which really create a pocket of a more temperate area to the south. So as I mentioned, Monchiero is a family winery. What does that mean? They really represent the wine traditions of this particular area. They were originally this branch of the Monchiero family. It's a kind of a common name in the area, originally from the town of La Morra, a hamlet called Santa Maria. They actually came over across this little valley to Casonifoletto in 1954 to work as sharecroppers, mezzadri, on a very important estate called Montanello. There it is. It was one of the first actually cooperative winery in the Langhe area. And what does that mean? The family, it was actually two families, so the Monchiero family, lived there. They worked on the farm. They managed the vines and the vineyards and also some vegetable gardens in exchange for half of what was produced. And Vittorio, Luca's father, was born at the Montanello estate in 1966. Now, over time, the mezzadria system, the sharecropping system, was phased out. It was very important for a period of time, but it didn't really serve the mezzadri that well because it was hard to sort of get ahead. They were sharecroppers. They worked the land in exchange for part of the produce. But so it was gradually abolished, and the Monchiero family went out and started producing their own wine. And eventually, around 1972, they created their own winery just up the road a little bit in Casonifoletto. Now, Vittorio, you can see this transition from sharecroppers who were farmers. You could even call them in a certain way peasants. This was originally the peasant class who was just working on the land and managing the estates of other people. Vittorio was the first one in his family to actually go and study viticulture at a very highly regarded enology school in Alba. He graduated in 1987, then took over the management of the winery, and Daniela really is like the other half of Vittorio. She manages the office and all of the very complex rules and regulations that need to be followed, and all of the billing and things like that. And now, of course, we have Luca and Stefano actually playing a growing role in the activities of the winery. So Monchiero has 11 hectares. That's about 25 acres. Not a bad holding, and especially given where it's located in some very prestigious towns in the Langhe area. Casonifoletto, La Mora, Verduno, Rodi are all in the Langhe area, actually in the Barolo wine region. And then just in the adjacent area of Alba. Now, very interesting, they produce about 70,000 liters of wine a year, but only about 40,000 bottles are produced. About 30% of their production is sold in bulk, and that's very traditional. That's something that people originally did before they actually were able to create their own wineries. And it's something that many people still continue to do. And for Monquero, what that allows them to do is really make a selection of their best grapes and their best wines to sell, to bottle themselves. The rest they sell off in bulk, so they continue to have that kind of activity. Now, Monquero really works with the classic grape varieties of this wine growing area: Dolcetto, Barbera, Nebbiolo, Arneis, which we'll taste, as well as Moscato. Their yields are, that is the amount of grapes that they take from each vine, from each area, is moderate. So they don't really go for very high quantity. And it really has a lot to do with each vintage condition. They employ sustainable practices, meaning they don't, they try to be environmentally friendly. They're not certified organic, but they follow a lot of those procedures. They don't use any systemic chemicals or things like that. One of the aspects of a traditional winery, at least in Piemonte, is moderately long fermentations of the grape varieties that they're working with, like 21 to 26 days of fermentation maceration process. We can talk about what that is if anybody has any questions about that. Many of their wines undergo an aging period, and they do it primarily in large casks of Slavonian oak, which is different from the small barrique or other vessels, which is also a very traditional type of aging vessel. So all in all, and I think you'll see this when we start tasting the wines, Monquero offers a very clear representation of each of the grape varieties they work with and where the grapes grow, and also a particular growing season. And they do it in sync with nature. So here are the wines we're going to taste, and I want to get into them as quickly as possible because that's really what we're here for, and they really tell the story of wine growing in this particular area. So these are the four wines that we are going to be talking about. I know all of you, I believe, have the first three. There's some people that have also the Barolo, but even for people that don't actually have that wine, we'll try to make a bridge between the Langhe Nebiolo and the Barolo, going through this whole flight of wines. One thing I just want to talk about first is you see back here at this slide, after each wine, we say Langhe Arneis DOC, Barolo DOCG. What does that mean? I think it's kind of important to have a sense of what that really means. So these are appellations, denominazione di origine controllato. And all that means is a controlled place name of origin. All that means, well, it's actually a very important thing. And if you look at this pyramid of Italian wine, you see that half of it, 2/3 of it at the bottom are generic wines without geographic indication whatsoever. So some of them would be a red wine, could be from Italy, it could be from the European community. You can also have a generic wine identifying the grape variety or the vintage, but no geographical indication whatsoever. In the upper part, you have the orange part, you have something called IGT, which is an Indicazione Geografica Tipica, or protected geographical indication, which is it's on a higher standard because it really ties the wine into a specific place very closely. Above that, you have the DOC and DOCG category, which are protected designation of origin. And that is really the highest level of Italian wine production. And Piedmont does not have any IGTs at all. They only have DOC and DOCG appellations. So it's really is at the highest level of quality. And the appellations really control everything that goes into the wine, what the grapes are, where they come from, all of the regulations that pertain to a given type of wine. And when you're talking about DOC and DOCG, they are very, very specific and very detailed. So the first wine is up here, Langhe Arnés. Now, if you look at this map over on the left side there, the entire area here is the Langhe. And the Langhe is a wine growing area. It's also a place. There's the Langhe. This is the Bassa Langhe, the lower part. There's also an Alta Langhe, goes up into the mountains. But this is the wine region known as the Langhe, and it's the entire area. It says, if you look over on the bottom left of the list of appellations there, you see Langhe in green. The whole thing is green. This is the Langhe area. So quite an extensive area. We're going to talk about that because each of the wines we're going to taste comes from somewhere within this area. So this first wine is a Langhe Arnés, which means Arnés is the name of the grape variety. Langhe is the appellation. And what I've circled there is the specific area in which it grows. Monquero's vineyards for Langhe Arnés. This is the Scaparone area of Alba. It's very close to the Tanaro River, which divides, we're not talking about wine appellations now, but it divides the area of the Langhe from another area called Roero on the other side of the Tanaro River. The Roero is really where the Arnés grape is native to that specific area within Piedmont, and it was almost extinct, really on the verge of just going into extinction until a couple producers got behind it and saved it from disappearing, literally. So this area where Monquero grows their Arnés, you could do it anywhere within the extensive Langhe area, but their vineyards of Arnés are very close to the Roero area. Same kind of sandy alluvial soil, which are alluvial is deposited by a river, which is the Tanaro River in this case. And you'll see now we're gonna go in and taste the wine now. That's what we have to do. But what this soil really gives you is you get the character of the grape variety, which we'll talk a little bit about itself. But then you have it comes from this area of loose sandy soil with alluvial deposits, which are really what Roero, what Arnés likes best, very similar to the Roero area. So as I mentioned, a very rare grape variety. Still, it came back from the verge of extinction. Now it's a DOCG in the Roero area, so the highest level of wine production there. It means the name Arnés means rascal in Piemontese dialect because it can be a little bit tricky to grow sometimes. It's very particular about where it grows, and it's susceptible to a few different diseases. So it's not the easiest grape to grow, but it has its own unique personality. So let's get in there and taste it. This wine is 100% Arnés for the Langhe appellation. It requires a minimum of 75%, but in this case, it's 100%. So it really supersedes that minimum. Southwest exposure, as I mentioned, sandy alluvial soil. This one gets all stainless steel fermentation, no wood at all, because you really want the cleanness and be able to taste the fruit, the very fine, delicate fruit. And they produce about 3,700 bottles of this wine. So not a huge level of production. So what I would like you all to do first is we're going to go through these 4 steps with every wine we taste. Take a look at it. You can swirl it around, but it's not really about that. It's just about looking at the wine. And you see that this wine is very clear. It has kind of a pale straw color, very transparent, maybe a little touch of kind of burnished gold, but very, very light. And then take a sniff. You can swirl it around, aerate it a little bit. And one of the things that really characterizes the Arnés grape, I don't know how many of you have ever tasted it or even heard of it before. It is very unusual, very rare. But one of the things that really distinguishes this grape variety is its aroma. Very, very subtle, delicate floral aroma. I get lots of kind of, white fruits, so white peach, a little, little dried fig perhaps. And then we go into the palate. Medium body, you can feel it. It's not light and frivolous, but it's very sort of gentle but firm. It has a presence to it. That's what really always strikes me about Arneas. It's not your innocuous white wine, and it's not kind of the fleshy, concentrated type of Chardonnay palate profile either. A lot, I would say medium bodied, a lot of cold golden apples, ripe fruit flavors, and the finish, which is kind of the last step in our tasting profile experience, is very fresh. It's invigorating. It kind of leaves your palate tingly and asking for a bit more. And with that, I'd like to bring Luca in and just see if he has any particular comments or experiences with this particular wine.
Okay, so hi everybody, and yeah, the Arneis is probably the most typical white wine from our area, or the only one. There's only Nascetta on the other side in the Langhe area. The Arneis, I think, is probably the most, we can say, the most varietal white wine. Some of the most varietal, some of the most indigenous from the area, and really. We're really happy to vinificate this particular wine and to keep going with this traditional white wine, maybe not so common like other international white wine, but I think he has many potential on aging too. Some good vintage like this one 2019 are really fresh, but they can age for 3-4 years with any problem.
Thank you very much. And I would I agree with all of that. And I think that Luca made a very good point. It has its own unique personality. It's a little bit different. We're all very familiar with Chardonnay, Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, and they're excellent grape varieties. But this one has its own unique personality that you won't find in many other places. And it's also a very reasonably priced wine, very accessible. It could be an everyday wine, but kind of elevate every day that you drink it. So, and very versatile too. Goes very well with the food or as an aperitivo. Moving on to the next wine. Now we're taking a step into a whole different world of grape varieties in any case. This is a Barbera. Now you see that this is the area of Barbera. It's the orange area. So you see that where the arrow points is the blue part, yes, but it's the entire area that's outlined in orange. This is Barbera d'Alba growing area, DOC. This is a bit older, 2016 vintage. Now this one is located in the same general area. Well, part of it is anyway. Part of it is in Alba in the Scaporone area, a little bit up from the river, not as quite as close. The soil there, while it's close by, it's very different. A little bit more clay, a little bit more compact soil, although the altitude is fairly low. The hills are very gentle there. But this wine combines two different soils, the same grape variety, Barbera, but part of it is in Scaporone in the Alba area, and another part of it is in Castiglione Folletto, in the Barolo area, which, once again, same variety, Barbera, but the soil is different, and it brings, it's more compact soil, there's more limestone there, it's a little bit higher up in altitude. So it's really combining these two different soils, that's the finesse of the loose sandy soil and the sort of structure and intensity of the clay and limestone, which gives it more body. Now you see on your label there, this is a Barbera d'Alba DOC, denominazione di origine controllata, superiore. And in this case, and in most cases, superiore, if you see it on an Italian wine label, usually, not always, but usually indicates a longer period of aging, a longer required obligatory minimum period of aging, as well as in some cases, lower maximum yield and other things like that. But so the aging and the lower yields add up to more structure, more concentration in the wine itself. And you'll taste that right away. Of course, now we're going from a white wine to a red wine, but we'll move ahead and you'll see that this one has this kind of fleshiness in body that really stands out. A little bit about the Barbera grape. It is the most widely planted grape variety in the region of Piemonte, which is saying a lot because there are a lot of different grape varieties that are grown in Piemonte and they produce a lot of wine. It's very robust. It's fleshy, juicy. The fruit tends to be quite forward, but the tannins, and I'll mention a little bit about what exactly what that is. The tannins are very supple, and we can compare the tannins in this wine to the tannins in the Nebbiolo afterwards. The color also, if you pour it into your glass, if you haven't already, is relatively dark. It has moderate acidity to moderate high acidity, depending on where it grows. And there are two wine growing areas for Barbera in Piedmont. One is the Alba area, Barbera d'Alba, and the other is Asti, Barbera d'Asti, and they make a very different kind of Barbera. And for them, Barbera, they don't grow Nebbiolo there, so Barbera is their most important wine, most important grape variety and wine that's produced from it. So two very different styles. The wine itself is very versatile. You can find some Barbera, especially from the Asti area, that are light and fruity and fresh, and maybe even a little bit fizzy or frizzante, as it's called in Italian. Or they can be full and round and structured and intense and age-worthy as well. You can drink it young, but in many cases, they will really develop over time. And I think, this one is already 4 years from the vintage. So I think we'll see that in this wine. Once again, it is a superiore, which generally is more inclined to benefit from some additional time. This one is 100% Barbera from these two areas, Alba and Casanefolletto. It's matured for at least 12 months. And this time it's in wood. These are large casks, about 500 liters of Slavonian oak. So they're big casks and they're thick casks. It's not like a small French barrel with toasted oak that you get a lot of these vanilla, toasty flavors. These are big casks of thick wood, and they're used for a long time, 10, 20 years or more. The alcohol level here is about 4.5% alcohol by volume, and they produce about 6,500 bottles. So now we'll go through this, the same thing we did before. This is what we do pretty much every time we're actually tasting a wine, but even when we're enjoying it, first thing you do is always look at it like anything else. What you see can tell you something about what you might experience. And once again, as I said, it's fairly dark. If you try to look through the glass, you can barely perhaps see your fingers through the wine. It depends on how much wine you have in your glass, but fairly dark, somewhat viscous. So a little pink rim perhaps, but pretty dark colored, purplish, even a kind of garnet tinge perhaps. Then the aroma. Here the fruit really jumps out. I get a little sense of the wood, which I think it means that it could still even benefit from a little bit more time. It hasn't reached its peak yet. Even just in the aroma, you feel that it's a very warm, robust wine with mature fruit. I'm not saying that the wine is mature, but the fruit itself is really ripe and fleshy fruit just from the nose. And on the palate, if you taste it, you feel the structure right away. You feel these tannins. A tannin is actually a chemical compound in primarily red wines. It comes from the skin of the grapes primarily, maybe also the seeds. You can also pick up some tannin from wood aging, especially in new wood. And the tannin gives it structure. It also dries your mouth out a little bit. And that is actually very important, especially when you're having the wine with food. So it creates this sort of drying out of the mouth, which kind of makes you salivate and want to eat something. So very food friendly, and you feel the tannin, but it gives shape. It kind of gives shape to this intense fruit in the middle. And I would say too, the tannins are present, but they're very supple. And in the middle of that, I get this ripe black plum character and even some mushroom type of dried mushroomy aromas. This is on the palate. And the finish keeps going on. I don't know if I'm sure you're tasting the wines. I hope you are. You feel that the fruit lingers, and so does that drying out of the mouth, which some people have a hard time with palate, with this tannin on their palate kind of puckering their mouth, but I love it. And I'm maybe I just spent a lot of time in Piedmont drinking Nebbiolo, and you get very used to that, and almost don't even notice it anymore. But so I find it to be, very, very pleasant but structured. It's got a lot of body and structure to it. Luca, what would you like to say about this wine?
The Barbera is, in my opinion, the most rustic plant in the area. It's really sensible and really strong in the same time, and we can see this in the wine too, because the temperature, the weather during the vintage completely change the wine. We can have a vintage really hot with a high alcohol, big structure, a lot of color, and vintages with maybe low alcohol, really light color. It's a variety who change a lot depending on the weather, depending on the rain, depending on the heat. The heat is really sometimes can make a big damage on Barbera. We can have a really high alcohol. We can arrive to 16 alcohol in some vintages. And so it's really sensible and at the same time really rustic, because the plant is a really indigenous and rustic and wild plant, different than Nebbiolo, which is more noble in the plant too.
Good points. And you see too that as Luca said, they, like most other traditional winemakers, they make wine in sync with the vintage, with the particular events that happen during a growing season and have a big impact on the grapes themselves. So you always get the same fundamental character from the grape vine itself, but you have to, or at least what I would consider to be a good producer, works with any given vintage and what the characteristics that season brings to the grapes and to the wine. And so, as Luca said, you can have a big variety from one year to the next, and that is not. It's not like one is necessarily better than the other, but sometimes you might have a vintage, as Luca said, that might be more inclined. It might need a little bit longer aging, and others said you might want to drink a little bit sooner. So they're all good, and if they're being made by a good wine grower or winemaker, but they're different, and that kind of keeps it exciting and interesting and ever changing. So now we're going into another wine. Once again, another wine altogether, different character, as Luca said, different personality fundamentally. Here we're talking about Langhe. So it's another Langhe appellation, Langhe Nebbiolo, DOC in this case. Once again, the entire area over on the left side is the Langhe area. So this is the Langhe area using the Nebbiolo grape. Requires at least 85%. It can be grown anywhere in the Langhe area. But it makes it very interesting when you have a producer who happens to be located in the Barolo area. This is that red area that we've kind of been looking at on the map here, right in the middle. So within the Barolo area is located within the Langhe area, but it's smaller, it's much more specific. People who wine growers who are in the Barolo area make Barolo. It's the most important, the most prestigious wine of the area, of the region, of Italy, and some people would say of anywhere in the world. It's one of the kind of the most prestigious grapes, wines. So when a producer makes a Langhe Nebbiolo who is working within the Barolo area, it's really sort of like a baby Barolo in many ways. Same grape variety from the same general area. It just doesn't undergo the lengthy aging process of a Barolo. The yields might be a little bit higher. In many cases, a producer might declassify a Barolo. So from vineyards that they normally make a Barolo in a given year, if it's not the greatest year for a particular vineyard, maybe it gets hail, maybe it's just not showing quite as well as they would like it to for the most prestigious appellation, they can declassify a Barolo and make a very, very good Langhe Nebbiolo. So all I mean to say is that if you're getting a Langhe Nebbiolo from a producer within the Barolo area, oftentimes it's the same vineyards in which they would grow vines for their most important wine. Very different grape from Barbera. It's early budding and late ripening, meaning that it has a long growing season. The name we think comes from the word nebbia in Italian, which means fog, because the Nebbiolo just keeps hanging there on the vine and maturing and getting better. And even once it reaches its necessary amount of sugar in the grapes to transform into a certain amount of alcohol, many producers will let it just keep hanging there because it just keeps maturing on the vine and getting better and better. And something we call phenols, polyphenols in the grapes are maturing and are multiplying actually. So it creates much more complexity overall. The Nebbiolo grape is incredibly site sensitive. I mean, most grapevines are, but this one can really show itself very differently from one vineyard to one just across the road, for example, and very different characters because it responds very closely to its particular site. The skin of Nebbiolo is quite thin, unlike Barbera, and low in something we call anthocyanins, which is something in the skin which gives the wine pigment. It has to be leached out through a maceration, crushing the grapes and allowing them to sit in the must, the grape juice, and extract these pigment compounds from the skin to give the wine its color. Otherwise, if you peel the grape, you would see it's fairly clear inside. In addition to low pigment in the skins, and here you have to really try to extract as much as you can. It's very high in tannin, this chemical that kind of dries your mouth out, and also pretty pronounced acidity. In addition to being very site sensitive, it has an amazing ability to evolve over a very long period of time and really develop its character and its personality and its complexity over time. And we'll be seeing that with this wine. Now, if you haven't already, pour it into your glass and take a look. This is a 2017 vintage. 100% Nebbiolo. Once again, it only requires 85%, but this is 100% Nebbiolo from the village of Casanifoletto, right in the middle of the Barolo wine growing area. This one spends about a year and a half and once again in the large casks of Slavonian oak, a little bit less alcohol than the Barbera, 14%, and of the Langhe Nebbiolo, only about 4,000, not 40,000, 4,000 bottles produced each year. So once again, you can see here, it's extremely transparent. I love that. Some people, once upon a time, it was looked upon as kind of a flaw that it wasn't dark enough. Sometimes they would plant other vines in the same vineyard and harvest them together and vinify them together to give it a little bit more color and density. But it doesn't have sort of necessarily the body, the fleshiness of some other grapes like Barbera, for example, or Grenache or Cabernet Sauvignon, certainly. But it has finesse. It's much more closer to a Pinot Noir than a Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, because it doesn't have that density and heaviness. It has finesse and transparency in more ways than one. So if you look at this one, you see that it's quite transparent. Very pretty red, shiny character to it. The aroma is very, very typical of Nebbiolo and also very different than the Barbera. You get a lot of these, at least I do, a lot of these dried violets and ripe cherries, red currants, a little bit of tobacco leaf on the end. On the palate, you really feel that the tannin right away, and you feel it when it first hits your palate, and then at the end in the finish. But in the middle of that, you've got this beautiful core of ripe red fruits, red currants, nice acidity. The tannins to me, I mean, some people might find them harsh and kind of dry, but to me they feel silky. Once again, you kind of feel your mouth salivating a little bit, and wanting to take another sip. And the finish is very long. It's dry, it's tannic, but it's a long finish, and I would say very delicate, as I mentioned, kind of silky tannins. Luca, cosa dici?
About Nebbiolo, we can say many things, and they will be all not so much useful. But I think what I like to say is that Nebbiolo has always been considered like the most noble grape and the grape of the noble, and not because of his high expensive cost, but because the low production. So when there was difficult vintage or many other things, normally Nebbiolo was always the lowest production vineyards, and it's like this from many years. So people were not planting Nebbiolo until there was only the importance was only the price of the grape, and they started to plant this Nebbiolo more and more and produce more Barolo only when the prices started to get high and the quality has been recognized. Because, as I was saying in the past, was really important to produce many grape and not sometimes good wines. And when the the mentality changed, the Nebbiolo, with his low production and low yield, started to grow up and grow up. And what we can see today is that we only have to grow few grapes of Nebbiolo to produce a really good wine, and we don't need to produce many grape or other things. Nebbiolo is a wine that only needs to be we only have to take care of these little grapes and low quantity of grape, and they will do all, because they do all by themselves practically. It only depends on the soil and the season.
And that what Luca said is very true. And this was one of the big changes that took place when along with the abolishment of the mezzadri, the sharecropping system, because originally there was, farmers wanted to grow as many grapes as they possibly could. So they got the maximum quantity they could possibly squeeze out of their vines. And that meant that the quality of the wine was often not quite as high as it could have been. So one of the big transitions was when people realized they could actually make more money by producing less wine from fewer grapes. Then something changed. It was a big transition towards quality rather than quantity. And another thing is that so most producers now do much less than the maximum yield than they can to produce a better wine. And their Nebbiolo was always planted in the best spots in the area because it was the most particular and not always easy to grow. So they would plant it in the very, the very best spots for grapes where the snow melted first. That was typically the rule. So now if we take these two, the two red wines we have side by side, it's, here you can really see two very distinctly different grape varieties and wines. The Nebbiolo compared to the Barbera, you can see it in the glass. One of them is much darker, more robust, maybe warmer on the palate. The Nebbiolo is more transparent, a little bit more reticent, perhaps some more finesse, and even I would say more length. I opened the wine some maybe now an hour or two ago at this point, and now it just keeps opening up more and more. So I think this is a very interesting comparison of two different grape varieties from the same producer, the same general area, side by side. And now we're going to go into a different. And I know that not all of you have the Barolo, but you might be interested in trying it. If you like the Langhe Nebbiolo, you might really want to step up to a Barolo. And I don't necessarily mean step up in price. Well, yeah, the yields are much lower. They use only the very best Nebbiolo grapes for a Barolo. But step up in terms of intensity and complexity. And so this one is certainly the most prestigious wine of the Langhe area. We could say also Piemonte and Italy overall, one of them at least. This one, while the Langhe Nebbiolo requires a minimum of 85% Nebbiolo, Barolo requires 100% Nebbiolo from within the very small Barolo wine growing area. The maximum yield per hectare is 8,000 kilos per hectare. Much higher. Nebbiolo is a higher level. I think it's about 12,000. But as Luca said, most producers harvest significantly less than that, and they reduce their yields to achieve a better quality. Barolo has to age for at least 3 years before it can even be called Barolo, with at least 18 months of the 3 years in a wood container. And I said that Nebbiolo has the capacity to evolve and develop over a long period of time. And Barolo takes that even further because of the specificity of where it grows, the lower yields, and the attention that is really given to that particular variety. So this is the Barolo area. It's comprised of 11 different towns. Only 3 of them are completely within the boundaries. Oops, let me go back a second. Within the boundaries of the Barolo area. Barolo, the town of Barolo itself, which gives its name to the wine and to the appellation. Cassonefolletto, where Monchiero is located, and Serralunga. Then there are 5 principal villages, so those 3 plus La Mora and Monforte, and then some others, so 11 townships overall, but only 3 of them are completely within the wine growing area. And Barolo and Castiglione are really considered to be the classic hearts of the Barolo wine growing area. So Monchiero's Barolo comes from, of course, it's 100% Nebbiolo, but it comes from vineyards within the township of Cassonefolletto. As I mentioned, it has to age for at least 3 years. They do 24 months, so 2 years in the Savonian oak casks and another year in bottle, just to sort of mature and refine in the bottle. This vintage, 2011, about 14.5 degrees alcohol by volume, only 3,500 bottles produced. And here you'll see a lot of things in common with the Nebbiolo, of course. This one is a little bit darker. Still has that same transparency, which really typifies the Nebbiolo grape. The nose here, to me, really is in a whole different level. It has a lot of complexity to it. Really pretty. Every time I go and smell it, it's something else comes out, but it has this kind of rose petal character to it, dried cherry, licorice, asphalt, much more concentrated aromas coming out. On the palate, it almost reminded me of balsamic vinegar, not in terms of the astringency, the sourness of it, but in terms of that feel. When we say something is balsamic, it kind of has this sort of almost slightly syrupy concentrated feel to it. The tannins on the palate here are very big, but they're not harsh. They're young, but they're fine in a certain way. Very tightly knit wine overall. And once again, you can see, or you would see if you go and try this wine, that the tannins really give it structure and definition to all of these other the aromas and the flavors that are in the wine itself. Very long finish. Luca, what do you think?
Yeah, Barolo is, in this particular case, this Barolo that we consider as a classic Barolo is 100% from Castiglione, and is what I like to say is probably the most traditional Barolo from our cellar. We produce many kind of Barolo, many different cru. The classic, we still producing a classic Barolo because we want to keep going this tradition, because before cru there was all Barolo, and I think, in my opinion, many vintage we can taste the best Barolo from the classic, from the blended, because we can have more different little particularity from different vines, different vineyards, and we can blend. There's always the same grape, but we can blend these different, so maybe more acidity, more alcohol, and many times we produce many vintage. We produce the best wine, of course, I think, when they are young, about the Barolo Classic, so blended. And then aging, many times we can, on the cru, we can find more some particular, some specific. On the Barolo Classic, we can find all the elegance and all the structure of this wine. We, as I said, for Nebbiolo, we only have to do a few things on these wines. We only filter practically, and then leave it in the barrel, and then leave it in the bottle, because it's really important period in the bottle for us, and we are trying to keep it as much as possible in the bottle, because it's where the biggest change happens.
So Luca was using a term called, so we can compare these. I already said there was and I think Luca explained it very well. There's a sort of a big step from a Langhe Nebbiolo up to a Barolo, just because of its, its specificity of where it grows and the aging regimen and the low yields. But we just wanted to talk about one other Barolo. Luca mentioned the cru. And what a cru is referred to in Piemonte traditionally is a single vineyard area. People still use the term in Piemonte, as they should. It's kind of a cru means growth. And of course, Piemonte borders France, so that might be where they picked that up. Now in 2009, 2010, they overhauled the entire system. And these vineyard sites are very, very old. They've been there for hundreds of years. I studied the deed book, the land deed book in the town hall of Casonifoletto, and you could see many of the vineyard names there 300 years ago, easily written out. So they've been there for a long time, but they were never officially registered and delineated. So that happened in some cases, for better or worse, but that took place in 2009, 2010. Now there are 181 what are now called menzione geografica aggiuntive, which just means added geographical mentions on a label, which define a certain area. In some cases, a vineyard. In other cases, a wine growing area. Now here we're talking about a very particular area. This is a wine that Monchiero produces from the Rocche di Casonifoletto vineyard. It's located right there. It's this strip of, it's a blue on the map. Very particular vineyard, very steep. It's sitting on a cliff. That's what Rocche means. And so if you, I believe that this wine is in the vine spot. If you have an opportunity, and if you really like Nebbiolo, then you wanna see sort of the steps from a Langhe Nebbiolo, from grapes within the Barolo area, to a classic Barolo, as Luca said, a blend of different vineyard sites. And Monchiero has 4. There's 3 of them are located in Castiglione itself. So when Luca was saying our classic Barolo is in many ways in some vintages probably the best, they have 2 other vineyards that have different expositions, different soil makeup from within the same township. And when they're blended together, you have this sort of, perfect balanced harmony of Nebbiolo grapes from more structured vineyards and others from finer ones. And when you taste one of these vineyards on its own, like in this case, Rocche di Casonifoletto, it has a very different personality and character from the others. So very, might be very interesting to try. This one faces southeast, so it gets the morning sun. Once again, on a cliff, the soil tends to be very thin. It's really famous for its aromatics, for its aroma and perfume. Maybe a little bit lighter in color, at least it was in the past, but a very interesting wine. And here you get specificity. Maybe it doesn't have quite the full balance of a classic Barolo, but you have this particular character. So, and here's a picture of the Roque Vineyard. So that is, and that would be another interesting comparison. So you have compare the Nebbiolo to the Barbera, and two very different grape varieties. The Nebbiolo to the Barolo, you see a big step there in terms of not quality, because they're all quality wines, but in terms of personality and character. And then from this classic Barolo, a blend of different vineyards from the same township, to the specificity of one particular vineyard site with its own unique character and personality. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed the wines. I hope you feel stimulated to try some of the other Monquero wines if you haven't already done so, and they're right there in your vicinity. So I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope that our words were in some way useful to help you understand and maybe appreciate the wines even more and find what you like and what you like about it.
Well, Alan and Luca, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Especially Luca, I know how late it is over in Italy, and we appreciate you being, staying up late into the evening. We do have some questions from some of our participants, and I know some of them have been answered also in the chat. But I had a question really early on. We're obviously familiar with, we hear French oak barrels. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Slovenian barrels and why that type of wood was selected for the barrels that the Monquero family might use?
Yeah, the biggest difference between Slavonian and the French oak is on the choice that has been made in the forest in the beginning. So when we talk about French wood, we talk about a really specific oak born in a specific restricted area of oak tree. When we talk about Slavonian, we talk on a really expands a really large area, really large wood, who starts from Austria, and arrives to Slovenia. And so what we have from these two different is that when we talk about Slavonian, we talk about less toasted, less varietal, we can say, so less sign in the wine. And why we put Nebbiolo inside this kind of wood is because we don't want to have other things in the wine. So we only need to have a place to store and to have the micro oxygenation, which is really important for this kind of wine. And that's the biggest difference. So many times we can't say if the wood is from a specific area, like French. We always say Slavonian, which means a really large area. And that's really because we don't really care about how the taste of the wood. We really care about the taste of the wine, and we want to maintain this.
And that's a very good point. Also, too, the Slavonian oak barrels are much larger than the smaller French barrique. So the wood therefore has to be thicker, so that otherwise it would not be able to contain 5,000 liters or more. So the wood is much thicker. It's not barrique tend to be used for 3 or 4 years for most people who use them, whereas the large Slavonian casks are used for a long time. And that oxygen, that micro oxygenation that Luke was talking about, it doesn't pick up any flavor of wood necessarily, but it allows the wine to breathe, and it does it very slowly through the thick wood and the larger surface area. There's in a barrique, a small barrel, there's much more surface exposed to the wine inside than in a larger barrel because it has much more volume. So a completely different environment to allow a wine to mature over time.
Great. Thank you very much for answering that. We actually had a question about the size of the casks as well. And this, I'm going to read this word for word, so it hopefully makes sense. If 400 bottles of the Nebbiolo wine are bottled per year, and a bottle holds 750 milliliters, that means 3,000 liters of Nebbiolo are bottled. 30% are sold in bulk, which means a yield of 4,300 liters. Why would you use a bigger cask than actually is the amount of wine that would go into that cask?
Well, actually, I think the numbers up front we mentioned for the Barolo, I think it was 4,000 bottles.
Okay.
Monchiero produces about 750,000 liters, but they only make 40,000 bottles overall. So they use the casks are all used. I mean, I'm not sure about the mathematics. It's a little bit complicated, but they make about 40,000 bottles. The Barolo, the Nebbiolo, and the Barbera are aged in large casks.
Okay.
So they use them. They fully utilize them. And it's 5,000 liters that they hold. So it's not all that much.
Okay. One of the questions was, Luca, you mentioned that Arnase was your family's Arnase is 100% Arnase. If other producers are blending it, what's the other varietal that they may blend in Arnase with?
Oh, I think in the area, the other whites, more international planted, are Sauvignon. I don't want to say Chardonnay because normally Chardonnay is vinified alone by themselves. Okay. But I think Sauvignon is the most used for a blend, or maybe the Favorita, which is another typical white wine from the area, really disappearing in the last 10 years. And it's a really strict parent to Vermentino from Tuscany, from the area, from Italy.
We had a question about these. And actually, I noticed when I was opening them, each one had a different kind of top. One was a screw top. One was cork. The Barbera was cork, and then Nebbiolo was it's a recyclable cork. And the question was, what determines what type of top you put on? And then my question was specifically about the sustainable version. I know Alan said your family's doing a lot of sustainable grape growing. Can you talk a little bit more about your sustainable efforts as well?
Okay, so about the cork, it's around 5-6 years that we can say we are doing a lot of experiments on it. So we normally bottle the same wine with 3 different cork always. So in this case, you add one with the recyclable, but it's possible that another one has the normal cork. Okay. That's because we want to have the different idea after 10, after 15, after 5 years. The same for the screw cap. We are using the screw cap. It's 2 years long now. So we are on an experiment, a real experiment we never tried, but we are happy with the screw cap, which is of course a recyclable one too. Mm-hmm. And about the sustainable, we are this year we will be certified inside a certification which is not the biological or organic, but it's the definition is a sustainable winemaking. So it means that we will use always less systemic, always less glyphosate, zero glyphosate from around 5 years now. And then we will start to certify the wine too. By now we are only certified in the vineyards, so not in the cellar. We will start from this year to certify the wines too. It means that we will not use any animal or other not vegetable things for the wines, like clarifying or other things. Mm-hmm. And and then it's all. And I think it will be really interesting to see how the different cork will evolve. We are really happy with the recyclable one from the normal cork for a short period, because we never tried for a long period. The same for the plastic one that many producers are using on the Barolo or other wine, and the same for the natural cork that are always being more difficult to find a good one.
Mhm.
They're always they always are having a big problem that all the wines, all the bottles are different when we open. And so that's why we are trying to change from the natural cork, because natural cork is getting really expensive and really difficult to find.
It makes sense. Like I said, I was, when we opened our bottle, I was really impressed to see it was a sustainable cork. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So cheers to your family and their efforts. One of our alums asked, so Luca, and what is your favorite wine that you produce? And then does your family have one that you maybe sit down with at a table and it's kind of like your always go-to bottle of wine, maybe on a Sunday dinner or something after that?
Yeah, it's a difficult choice, because most of the wine are a part of our story. So when we talk about the Rocche from the Barolo area, we talk about our story because it's the most important for us, the one who make us, we can say, famous.
Mhm.
And then the Montanello, because it's the first Barolo that we produced, of course. But if I have to say my favorite, I would say the Rocche.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And from the family, I think the Montanello, because it's where my father is born, it's where our cellar is born, and where my grandfather started to do all.
Okay. That makes complete sense. And Shelly from the Wine Spot let me know that if anyone's interested in the Rocca, they do have bottles at the Wine Spot here locally. So
The Roca we actually absolutely have access to. We'd order it easily done. I have all of these are available to us at the Wine Spot easily, and whatever you need and want, let us know. Yeah.
So going back to the question about the one that was I think it was the Nebbiolo, 30% of the wine is or 70% is bottled and then 30% is bulk. What does no, Alan?
That's actually their overall production.
Okay, the overall production. What is the difference between bottled and bulk? Like, what would be a bulk wine?
A bulk wine is a wine that is sold in high volume. It's not bottled. So they'll produce wine and then they'll put it into a transport tank and sell it to someone else who's going to bottle it, maybe blend it with something else.
Okay, great.
And that was traditionally what many people did in the olden days, because there weren't as many wineries. There, many people were just working in the vineyards and growing grapes and maybe making wine, but not actually bottling it.
Great, thank you. I'm just looking to see if we have any other questions. Let's see. I know Tim had mentioned we had a question about the alcohol content, and it was in the and he wrote into the chat an answer. But could you maybe, for someone who didn't see that, could you go into what determines the alcohol content of a bottle of wine?
Yeah, and I don't know if Luca wants to add something, but it has to do with the amount of sugar that's in the grapes. So the higher the level of sugar, the more the alcohol comes out during the transformation by yeast from sugar to alcohol. And I mean, I would say we all know that the temperatures are rising. There's a kind of an overall global warming taking place. In the area of Piemonte, it's quite far north. Historically, the big challenge for wine growers there was getting enough ripeness in the grapes to translate into 12.5, 13 degrees alcohol. That was a big struggle, and Barolo required 13 degrees alcohol. So they had to get really, decently ripe grapes. Now the problem can be over ripeness because it's much warmer. I would say that we're seeing higher levels throughout the world. Overall, the alcohol levels tend to be quite higher, but the most important thing to me is not the measurable level of alcohol in the wine. And we're talking, 1 or 2 percentage points. So it's not, really anywhere near a fortified wine or anything like that. The most important thing is balance. So if you have that kind of, it's a hot year, you get a lot of ripeness in the grapes, but you manage to pick them at the right time. It's balanced with acidity and tannin. You don't feel the alcohol. And, 1 degree more or less is not really going to make that much of a difference. You can have a wine that has 13 or 13 and a half, but it's not in balance with the other components of the wine, and you feel the alcohol. So the important thing here is to have a balance there.
Great.
And I think a lot of growers in Piemonte and a lot of other places are going to be struggling with how to keep that balance in the grapes when they're growing them. So producers there are changing things. People were used to reduce the yields on the vine. Now they're maybe keeping a little bit higher yields because they want the quality, yes, but they don't want the concentration and the overripeness. And they're also leaving more leaves on the plant to protect the grapes from overripeness and sunburn as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I never really thought about how global warming is going to impact, or I mean, climate change is impacting, growing, and how that will eventually change, wine. And
it's going to change a lot of things. And for example, we're talking about Barolo. So one of the regulations, one of the kind of golden rules for Nebbiolo for Barolo is that it cannot come from a north-facing slope, because traditionally those exposures would not get enough sun to get sufficient ripeness for this wine that's going to undergo an extensive period of aging. That might change in the future now. Some of those places that were not even permitted for Nebbiolo for Barolo in the past might be some of the better sites in the future, because they're more moderated. The best exposed places might become more of a deficit than an advantage.
I have 2 more questions, and I know we're kind of getting along. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So one question was, we hear of other regions of Italy and their wines, and there's a big tourist trade around where they are. Is Barolo would you say it's a very touristy area, or is it more kind of off the beaten path and kind of a hidden gem in Italy that maybe not a lot of people know about?
I moved there full-time in 2003.
Okay.
And when I got there, Castelfidardo was the sleepy town of Barolo. It was right in the middle, classic Barolo village. I mean, I did a lot of investigation and exploration in the history of that particular area. So really critical to the whole development of the Barolo area. But there weren't that many tourists that came there, because they would go to the other better known places like Barolo or the bigger village of La Morra or Monforte. Now it's changed a bit. I think Luca would agree. There's a lot more tourism there. The area was awarded a United Nations World Heritage Site for its vineyards in the Langhe and other areas. So I think that's brought a lot of people too. And it's much more populated now than it was. Even Castiglione, which has about 750 people. And if you ever, anyone who goes there, if you want to visit Monchiero, they have a bed and breakfast there as well. So, there's a lot more places, a lot more things to do there and things to see, a lot more people visiting the area.
Awesome. And then finally, the last question is, could you just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by the structure of wine?
The structure of wine, it's one of the components, and a lot of it, and maybe Luca would like to speak to it too, but he went to enology school, so I'm sure he knows all about that. But, we talk about structure, it's something that frames some of the other flavor and aromatic components. So you have the flavor of the grape, and you can give any kind of descriptors that you want to that. So that's sort of the flavor part. For me, structure, which usually comes from tannin in the skins and acidity, is something that kind of shapes it, that gives it a frame or sort of outlines the core of flavor in the middle. So it really kind of helps focus it and structure it literally like you would, a building or an architecture, an outline of something.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for being with us this evening. This was truly a special program for us. And we're so thankful that you took the time to be with us and sharing the Manqueros wonderful wines. Very excited to try them. And I know our alums are, really appreciative and really enjoyed the program. So thank you all again so much for being with us. Before we kind of go into the more unstructured program, the more social gathering, if people want to hang out and just kind of catch up with fellow alums, I do want to give you all a couple updates on different programs that you can take advantage of at John Carroll in a virtual realm. On Wednesday, February 17th, the Columbus Alumni Chapter is hosting a program with Dr. Erin Johnson, a professor of biology at John Carroll. And she is going to be speaking on the history of vaccines, something that is obviously very relevant in our lives right now. On February 20th, Paul Guglielmo from the class of 05, the owner of Guglielmo Sauce in Rochester, New York, leads us through an Italian cooking demonstration. And having been to one of Paul's demonstrations, I can personally say it's a program you do not want to miss. And then to round out our programs in February, on February 23rd, Dr. Scott Allen, the Dr. James S. Reed Chair in Management in the Bowler College of Business, will be featured in our next installment of the Alumni Continuing Education Series. His program will focus on disruptive technologies. For more information on these programs and the recordings for all of our previous programs, including this one probably sometime next week, visit our website, jcu.edu/alumni. Finally, please consider a charitable gift to John Carroll in support of our students, our faculty, and the entire John Carroll campus. If you've already made a gift this year, thank you for your generosity. If you have not, please join me in supporting JCU so that we can continue to deliver an outstanding education for our current and future Blue Streaks. You can make a donation by visiting jcu.edu/give. Thank you again for joining us. For all those who want to leave, feel free. And I'll stay on the line for a little bit longer if we all want to connect and just kind of catch up and talk wine or talk about John Carroll or whatever else. So thank you again so much for being here.
Thanks.
I would like to say, sorry, Alan, I would like to say thank you to Alan. Thank you to Luca. Again, Luca, so late for you. We really appreciate it. Insights have been fantastic. Alan, the information was fantastic. And, as someone who's studying for SOM tests, it was super helpful. I appreciate it. Eric, thank you. Thank you to all the alums. If you need anything from the Wine Spot, please let us know. We're so excited to have done this for you. And again, cheers, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shelly.
Thanks for having us. Luca, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
opportunity to enjoy your wines. We really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you again, Luca.
Thanks, everyone.
Italy's 6 hours ahead, right?
It was it's about 3 o'clock his time now.
Wow.
So very, very kind of Luca to join us. We did a quick run through on Tuesday morning, and he was out in the vineyard pruning different vines, and just really appreciate all that went into making this event possible. So I hope you all enjoyed it. So I'm just going to